All right. Well, hey, thanks for coming today. I know that this is the time when it's like you want to drift off into sleep. And hey, I mean, there's like a whole row of chairs over there. Like that is totally cool. No, there's no judgment that'll happen there. So this is going to be sort of I kind of changed it to be like more of a hands-on workshop class. So how many people have laptops and would be willing to kind of like do some work on it? Got a couple? Okay. And so, if I know it's a security conference, so you don't want, not so buddy-buddy. Pretend like it's like a dev conference, right? So like maybe you could pair with somebody could take a look at what you're doing. If you're cool with sharing, just kind of make some sort of gesture to your neighbor to make sure that's okay. But the whole point of this is like at the end of it, I'd like for you guys to be able to walk away with like a working Gauntlt attacks directory with some attacks already fleshed out that you're ready to go, and you can take back into your work. Like really, I think that would be really helpful, and to be able to use it that way. And that's kind of the approach that I'd like to do there. All right, so if you want to follow along with the slides, you can get to the slides at this link. I'll leave it up here for a second on bit.ly LASCON-Gauntlt. But there's some other links that will be in here. Like I have some GitHub gists that you could just pull down, so you don't even have to like type up the whole thing. You just grab those, and then that would work as well. You guys got it? Getting me to move on? Yeah. All right. Okay. So who am I? Let's see. I live here in Austin. I helped start LASCON in its early days, and it's really cool to see how the conference has grown over the years. Help out with DevOps days here in Austin as well. And I end up doing like DevOps stuff, some Ruby. I spend a lot of time writing Chef. Anybody familiar with Chef? Yeah. So I spend a lot of time in that, writing Cucumber, all that kind of stuff. And that's kind of the day-to-day world for me. Well, I thought I'd kick this off with a little saying that I've become fond of lately is like, work like a captain, play like a pirate. I always have to like catch that because I always say it wrong inversely, but I like it because it sort of distills or helps us think about like, okay, like how are we going to approach this task? And I think we often approach it in the pirate task. Like we're always like we're really good. I mean, look at this conference. Like we're good at having fun, right? We got video games and there's mechanical bull and there's drinks and there's all sorts of stuff that's going on. I think the security community is good at the play part, and I think we're also good at we also kind of work like pirates, right? Like we're used to taking advantage of trying to do hacking, trying to like work in social engineering, trying to do pen testing, but we have to think about like, okay, what does it really mean to be like to work like a captain? Or like what would we do if you were to like take that approach? And I think the answer to that is Gauntlt, and I'll like explain like what this is. Like Gauntlt is rugged theology applied, and okay, so that kind of like begs the question, like, well, what is rugged? And who's familiar with rugged in here? Okay, so about 20% maybe. Yeah, rugged was born out of a movement with Josh Corman, David Rice, Jeff Williams. And they started approaching this and saying, all right, well, like we need to build software that it's defensible. We need to build software that can withstand multiple attacks. We need to build software that can resist it. Back in 2010, there was a rugged manifesto posted. It's on ruggedsoftware.org. And it's real simple. It's very similar callback to like the Agile manifesto. Some people were confused, like, are you saying like this is the new Agile? But I think that's kind of been sorted out. But that's how Agile started, right? It's like we will stop delivering software in this crazy process that never involves our customers. And it's a similar call out to the security community. It's like we will build software that can actually like stand up to more than just a simple type of attack. And I find a lot of synonyms with that with DevOps, and I have what I call like the 6 R's of rugged. So forgive me for the alliteration there, but I think that part of this is like stuff needs to be repeatable. We often kind of spent if if you kind of look at the history of where we've come from, right, it's a lot of people are moving into this direction, and you see like, okay, we don't want to have any manual steps. We want to be hooked into your CI or continuous deployment pipelines. We want it to be reliable, so you can't DOS it. Reviewable, so infrastructure as code. I think it's it's just a good point to think like, all right, like we need to be able to look at our runtime systems that the customers are actually using, which is the way that customers view the world these days. I mean, I don't have to tell you. I mean, you guys know that, but it's not, in 1997 people getting DVDs, in a box anymore, right? Nobody wants that, and so customers, want the software now, and that's what they're paying for. So with that, you need to be able to. It's not just like a shipping software kind of game anymore, right? It's like actually building the software and supporting it and actually having the users interact with it. And like that's the true experience that's happening. And so it needs to be rapid, needs to be resilient, reduced. And so I think there's a joining factor though, like rugged and DevOps sort of like they're coming at the same. I think DevOps is sort of looking at it as like, okay, you had all these developer and operations, and they're kind of been separated. Like, what happens if you merge those together and start kind of conjoining practices? I think rugged is sort of the same vector, but like for security. And there was a really, DevOps is like a hard thing to define, and some people will say like DevOps is like a cultural movement, period, right? It'll like not go any further than that. Some people will say it's a cultural professional movement. John Willis and Damon Edwards, they have the famous, or I don't know if it's famous, but CAMS, DevOps is about culture, automation, measurement, and sharing. That's kind of become a de facto definition. But in 2009, basically what happened is like at Velocity, John Allspaw and Paul Hammond got up and they're like, we do 10 deploys a day. And everybody's like, oh, that's crazy, Like they're like, what do you mean, And they're like, yeah, we just push code all day long. And so there was like an outburst at that point, like how is that possible or whatever. And then today, see how far we've come in like a short amount of time. Like Jason from Netflix talking like, oh yeah, we do like 200, maybe 500 code pushes a day. Etsy guys are talking, yeah, we do like 30, 40, whatever. So it just kind of like depends on like your shop, kind of where you're at. But like that's the level of speed that people are iterating on stuff. And so also in that deck, it's like, hey, dev and ops actually have to come together if you want to have the previous slide. If you want to have that kind of capacity going on, you need to be able to have those groups joined. And so we're taking that and we're saying like, all right, well, Gauntlt looks at the world and says, all right, the world is now going to this continuous delivery, continuous integration viewpoint. People are moving everything that way. How do you get security tools inside of the pipeline of that? And so we're taking that approach. So I think this is kind of the value. This is what security tools look like today, right? They're complicated to build. They kind of fall over easily. You're not exactly sure what's going on, what's connected to what, and you really can't hand something like this off to somebody else and be like, hey, discern the meaning out of this, right? It would be insurmountable. And so when building Gauntlt, these are some of our core tenets. So we believe that Gauntlt, number one, is a way to help facilitate communication. And so we believe merging the boundaries between dev and operations and security has to happen. And so you kind of start building this like core language that comes together, and we believe Gauntlt is trying to be part of that. We also we have little quips that we talk about in the Gauntlt team, but it's like if you look at the way we've sort of done things now, it's like, well, let me go on like a mini side thing here. If you look in like most security organizations, right? Like, most organizations, maybe you'll have like, I don't know, like 100 developers. Let's just say you're about 100 developer shop. And then out of that, maybe you'll have like, 5 operations. And then out of that, like you may have like 1 security person. Have you guys seen that? Is that reasonable? Those ratios, more or less? I mean, unless you're like working at a security company, then like everybody is, right? But you have that ratio problem. And I think that the ratio problem was discovered earlier on with the DevOps people, right? They're like, oh yeah, everybody hates those 5 guys over here because these 100 people here are pushing all this code and they're like not testing it, and they're just deploying it, and they're just trying to do the best they can to get stuff out, and it's a complete disaster. okay, scrap that. Like there are no, like Netflix is like, there are no more operations folks. Like you guys are all one giant team together now. And the software you build must also run and customers must also use it. And if you write the code, you have to care about it. And I believe that shift is like actually happening in the security realm as well. And so we see that like over the next bit of time here, we'll stop being compliance-driven, auditor-led security, right? Where it's like you're not just trying to pass compliance or get the little hacker safe thing, or whatever it is, right? You're actually trying to do it because it's the right thing to do, and you're putting the testing inside of the build process. Does that resonate with anybody? Like, does that sound cool? Yeah, I got a one. All right. And I mean, I think that's ultimately that's where I hope Gauntlt is part of that. But I think that is the process of like where we're going. And so we're building a new language, and we're trying to be we're trying to talk in the currency that actually is spoken with developers, which is tests. Tests are what fail or what pass, and that's that's the currency, and that's the way that people trade between teams and how things work, right? So we believe, in summary, Gauntlt is like this bridge here that connects people. Okay, so there was a great talk on security monitoring at Monitorama. The EU one, it was just a few weeks back, and I was like, and he actually had a whole section on Gauntlt, and I was like super flattered about that. And I thought, well, he describes it this way, right, through Cucumber plus security tool integration. So I thought, that's a pretty fair definition. So I thought, I'll steal his slide, put it in here, and just say, that's what we see as going forward. Gauntlt.org is this is the web page. You can get to it, and you can start getting the. We have our Google group on there and some ways to connect with us. And we're actually going to do some code here in a second. So I'm just kind of setting up the stage here. So on GitHub, if you just go to Gauntlt, and it's actually Gauntlt/Gauntlt is our true repo. We use a suite of tools. We have Travis building regularly, and we have our gem badge and stuff like that. And it's real easy to install Gauntlt. Just do gem install Gauntlt. We're in Ruby gems, and you'll get the latest, greatest. Okay, so the philosophy behind Gauntlt here is, okay, so we're going to run tools in a repeatable, easy-to-read way. We're going to try to handle standard in, standard out exceptions, and try to make sure that we handle exit status properly. And we're looking at speed as like speed and linkage is better than like real complexity and doing things that like take a 5-hour run job. Although Gauntlt will let you run that if you wanted to, or we're looking at that. And we see Gauntlt as part of the pipeline. And so like as you're going and you're pushing code, it needs to be able to be hooked inside of your CI or your continuous deploy process. And also Gauntlt doesn't install your own tools under the hood, so you're going to have to install those yourself. So we're not package managers. Okay, so let's be captains. Yeah? No? I know it's 2 o'clock, but you could be like, yeah, R. Can I get an R? R. All right, good. All right, I got a full R. That's great. All right, so let's go ahead and start with installing our own tools. So you don't have to do this next step, but if you have Ruby, that'd be good. But I use RVM. I know there's some people don't like it, but I think it's pretty good. And you can just use Ruby 193. I believe everything in here will work with 187 as well, but you might have better luck with 193, depending on what system you're on. All right. And so we're going to start out, and who's following along, so I can kind of get some visual. I got some. So if I'm like going too fast on a slide, just be like, hey, so I'll back it up, and no problem. All right. So you just make a LASCON directory. Get in there, and then make a gem file. All right, who's familiar with bundle and gem files and how all that works? 1, 2. Okay, yeah. So basically, we're setting up a gem file, and we're going to add Gauntlt to it. Then we'll add some other dependencies we have later. But bundle's really nice because you run it, and then it sets up all your dependencies and puts it right in your execution, right there where you are, and you don't have to worry about taking care of any of the other business along with that. So inside of that gem file, this is the contents of that as of right now. I know it's super. You can give me a thumbs up when you're like good. If you're following along here, got one thumb. Or an R. An R works. Okay, got another one. We good? Got your gem file. All you got to do is have Ruby gems up there at the top, and then just say gem Gauntlt. And then you're going to say bundle. And when you run bundle, it should look something like this. All right. We got bundle going. Is it going okay with the internet speed, or is it kind of slow? All right. So let's do gem install Gauntlt. If you didn't want to do the bundle part, you could just do this, and it would probably work for you. I mean, it would work, but you're going to not manage all your dependencies with bundle that way. All right. So future slides are going to be using just the word Gauntlt, just to be short there. But you can just say bundle exec Gauntlt, and that's really what you're doing. So whenever you say bundle exec, you're like executing Gauntlt in that context of like the bundle that you just made. All right. First, let's just touch example.attack. Doesn't need to have anything in there. You just need to have like one attack file. If you don't have an attack file in the directory you're in, like Gauntlt starts like going everywhere to try to figure out like where the attack files are, and it makes it take a little longer. All right, so let's walk through what an example attack would look like in Gauntlt, and kind of like go through the steps, and then we're gonna work on 3 different attack files that you'll have like be able to package up for yourself, and you can use it later. And sort of to give you the framework of how it works. So let's start in here. So the first thing is you have this kind of given, when, then logic. And this is a single attack file. It uses the Gherkin language here, which is that simple given, when, then. And then we have this idea of like a feature and then a scenario. Anybody familiar with Cucumber? It like maps exactly one-to-one what those are. But basically, you can think of like a feature can have as many scenarios as you would like. You put this little background stanza up at the top if you want it to be inherited from all the below scenarios. So each time it runs in its own like independently clean context of each scenario, but that background step will run. And so all we're doing here is we're saying, given that nmap is installed, so we make sure the tool is there, and then given this following profile, we have this name value little structure that we have built up, and this is something that comes inside of Gauntlt for that purpose to, fill in config files or parameterize whatever you'd like to call in later. And we're going to do this just using the real basic nmap attacks here. So when I launch an nmap attack with nmap-f, and then you see this little hostname business, that is pulling out of the table from up above. So it's pulling down example.com and putting that in there. And then it's checking the output, that the output should contain port 80, and the output should not contain. Later we run the same thing, but it also runs it saying the output should not contain 25 TCP. And you could actually, probably what you'd want to do is actually take this then statement down here and put it up here so you're not performing multiple. You just perform one nmap scan and then do all your output checking, and then move on to your next scenario, which may be like a different type of nmap scan. But here, we're actually doing 2 of the same nmap scans. So it's not really, it's more like an example purpose. Does that make sense? So here's what it looks like when it runs with failing attacks. Basically Gauntlt runs, and I was like, well, no, I was looking and I was trying to find port 443. It wasn't open, so I'm calling that a failure. And here's what it looks like with a working. So it's just just color coded. It's nice. It's like helps you see this. And another thing, like we're running this all on the command line, and it's you can pipe this and chain this with other stuff, right? So as long as like Gauntlt runs clean, then do the next step in my build process, or do whatever it is that you want to handle next. Okay, so now you have Gauntlt installed on your box. You can do this, Gauntlt -- list, and if you're using bundle, you do bundle exec Gauntlt -- list. And that'll show the current attacks that we have in there right now. So we're what, at 8? I've got a couple others that we've been working on. So we have this nice one in here, generic, which basically will call out to anything on the command line. So you write yourself like a, maybe you're like, I'm not a Ruby person. You don't have to know Ruby to know Gauntlt. So you can just write your own Python wrappers or whatever it is that you'd want to execute and call that out on the command line, and that works. If you notice, like some of these that we have on here, like SQL map, it's just a Python script that we call out to, right? So the generic thing just sets you up and is able to execute that and pulls in your output from that. Let's see, what else is pretty interesting? Well, we'll kind of go through this. I think we're going to go through an Arachne attack, Nmap, and a Derby attack. So those will be the 3 that we'll actually look at here in a second. Gauntlt also has, it comes with these like pre-built steps, which are the pre-built operators of things you can do with Gauntlt. And so when you do Gauntlt -- steps, it gives you this big long list, and we could probably do a little bit better job sorting this out or giving you some parameters as you work through here. But let's read through a couple, right? So it says, given whatever is installed in my path is that very first one, it's like that's for the generic attack adapter. So if you were looking for something, it would say, oh yeah, I want to check that that's there. You have Arachne, curl, Derby, and it kind of goes through that list. Then we have this list here, which is, and I launch a whatever attack, right? And we have, most of these don't have this little like regex matching thing in here. Most of them just have this, okay, run a SQL map, SSLIs. But some of these have this little business in here where it's got the regex matching. And we'll talk about that a little bit later, but those are attack aliases. And so where in the earlier one, you still had the Nmap example we did, where you had to know like the fast Nmap attack is like with a capital F. Well, like you don't want to remember that. You don't want to memorize that. And that's not like it's like something maybe a network person or a security person might know, but that's something that maybe a developer or wouldn't know, or maybe some QA people wouldn't know. So it's not super useful. So we've started to work down the path of saying, all right, well, we're going to have attack aliases. And so we're kind of coming up with attacks that are real common. And then we're aliasing those to attacks under the hood that have like a description with them, tell you like the kind of stuff that we need to set up with that. And so an example that we'll do later is like a cross-site scripting one. So you can say, when I launch an Arachne - cross-site scripting XSS simple attack, whatever. And then you don't have to know anything else. You don't have to know anything about Arachne. You don't have to know how to parameterize or anything like that. The little thing will kind of help you do that. And hopefully that'll be clear later. And then we've got some other like output parsing things. We have some XML parsing. We have some things for cookies if you're playing with curl and trying to make sure that your cookies are working right. Or yep. So that's pretty much the Gauntlt. Just using Gauntlt itself is a good way to figure out how to use it. So if you do Gauntlt -- help, that kind of gives you the explanation of how to interact with it. And we have this other thing in here called all steps. And all steps is everything that you saw in the previous steps slide, but it actually includes all the Aruba step definitions. And you're like, well, what is Aruba? Well, Aruba is this really cool add-on to Cucumber, which does like file operations, and like it lets you do output parsing and regex matching and all that kind of stuff. So you're probably going to want to use those. So we put those in there as well, so you can list all those out. All right, so let's take a look at output parsing with Gauntlt before we start into our demos here, because I think output parsing is one of the ones that like kind of gets people hung up at first when they start using it. So we have a wiki page that walks through several different options here. It's on our GitHub page, and from Gauntlt, just on the wiki, it's called output parsing with Gauntlt. So you have these statements like find a string, right? And so you could say the output should contain, the output should not contain. You can do double line matching, so like this string needs to be on top of this string. You can also do regex matching, which is a lot more useful, especially with tools like Nmap, where they like pad it with spaces and stuff. Like you actually need to use that. And let's see, I can't read on my laptop too well, but then the output should match, and you have this little stanza right there. And you can put it in line. You have to do it with these, like with the forward slashes to delineate like what your regex's matching. The only downside of that is you can't actually match a forward slash at that point, so you have to replace it with a period. That's why it's like 80.tcp. If you do this multi-line thing here, you can do that because it just assumes anything that's in this triple quote statement is, like it knows like that's what it's actually looking for. Does that make sense? It's a little like weird, but that's kind of why I wrote this up to be helpful. Is it can be a gotcha. So I actually had a slide that was a little bit easier to see. So same thing I was just saying, right? In between the slashes, if you want to do it all in one line, make it real simple. If you actually want to match the slash, you can do that as well, but it needs to be put in this sort of stanza. Okay, so this is going to be our first attack, and we're going to do a network attack, and we are going to do a network attack against LASCON.org. So I'm sure WordPress won't mind us doing that. If you want, is that funny? That wasn't funny. I need to work on better jokes. Okay. Okay, so you can go to this URL here at the bottom, gist.github.com, and it'll actually pull down this file. And let's just read through this like what we're going to do. So create network.attack